standards for interpreters, qualifying standards. So we're the public facing registry that lists all of the interpreters in the state of Louisiana, so people can use that to access to find interpreters that they need. We also provide training, professional development, workshops, and most recently, we started a pilot this year of a mentoring program. That's intended to support teachers now working in the K through 12 age group, to support interpreters there in those settings. And then next year, we'll expand to actually bring in interpreters working in other settings, not only K through 12. So we're noticing quite a lot of gaps and seeing interpreters really struggling and needing more support and even reaching out for more support. And that currently in the last 2 years has been a major priority for us.
Wow. So SSPs, hearing aids, telecommunication distribution, and then interpreting standards and making sure that they're meeting the needs and having mentoring and all of that. Wow, that's a lot. So, how did you get to where you're at today? What did your journey look like to become a leader? And what was that initial moment where, that really shaped your path?
Sure. So to be entirely honest, it's hard for me to see myself as a leader. That's not a title that I have identified with. My background is as an interpreter. I was formally trained as an interpreter. I have a degree in interpreting and worked in the field of interpreting for many years. But there is something about my personality, I guess, where I am one to be very observant and notice barriers and challenges while I'm working, things that are happening in the community, challenges that are faced, and what the interpreters are facing as well, what barriers were being faced. And that is something that was constantly on my mind. And I was always trying to come up with solutions just from talking with friends, interpreters, deaf community members, and trying to come up with ideas and ways to solve these commonly faced problems and challenges. So I didn't look to get into this field in particular, but a position was open and I became aware of it. And in a different setting, in a prior situation, I had a mentor who I admired greatly. And I remember asking my mentor if, for example, if you see that a leader is needed, but none is coming forward, what do you do? Because my propensity was to kind of wait for someone to appear, for someone to make themselves known. And my mentor said, in that situation, you should step up and be the leader. If you have the ideas, you should do it. And wasn't totally confident that I was qualified, but I was put in a situation where I then had to step up. And that made me realize that, oh, actually, there is a way to lead without necessarily having all of the required skills yet. Just to take that first step. And taking that first step in itself is leadership. That you don't have to already get all the way to the finish line. Take that first step. And that has really helped me to build confidence to just do the work that's needed.
Yeah, I think oftentimes the perceptions of leaders is, wow, they have all of these skills and all of this experience, but every leader has to start somewhere, right? We're all human. We're all still learning every day. And to take the initiative to take that first step or to step up is fundamental to being a leader. Absolutely. So I love that you shared that and that you are always thinking about challenges and how to break down barriers. Oftentimes, um, we talk about seeing things from the balcony because so many, or going up and seeing it from the balcony, because so much you see things you can't see the forest for the trees type of thing. You need to get to the balcony to see who's dancing, who's leaving, who's around, what are they doing, to really see the big picture. I think in your everyday work, I'm sure that you use data a lot, and that probably guides your planning and whatnot. So how do you use data to how do you leverage data to inform your strategic decisions?
Hmm. So for me, that's actually interesting to think about data and what is meant by that in particular. What is data? So often people assume that that means numbers of some kind. How many people are served, or how many people fit this demographic, whatnot. And all of that is important information and in fact critical. But one thing that I've really found with data is, or just information in general, that it's all data. Anything that informs your work is data. So that means everything, all of that information is really important. So it's so important not to focus solely on statistics and numerical data, but instead to listen to everything, to listen to personal experience, to anecdotal data as well, and to find what is needed amongst the community through social media, through whatever, all of the ways that the community gives us information. All of that is data. And it seems like in state government, it's really easy to look at numbers in isolation. But for the Louisiana Commission of the Deaf, we really want to partner with our community and find out what we're not seeing in the numbers. We want to hear the anecdotal data, their stories that are collected amongst the community. That's a very powerful way to justify what we're doing, to convince people. So I think it's really important to use not only numbers.
Yeah, it really humanizes the information. It's not just numbers on a page. It gives understanding of the personal impact. So, at what point, I know that data is never really just enough, and we live in an information age with computers and technology, and we're constantly being bombarded by data. At what point do you know that you have enough data to move forward?
That's a fair question. I don't think you always know. To be perfectly honest, I think there's always a risk that you don't have enough. But if you're constantly not taking action because of lack of data, you're not really getting anywhere. So I think you have to find the balance between feeling like the data that you have is diverse, that it represents more than just one group or one part of the state or one level of hearing. That is the concept that I'm thinking of, is just that you need to ensure that your data is representative of a wide variety of individuals and that it's collected in a variety of manners as well. And I think that sometimes you just also have to leap and take the risk and hope that you in fact have enough information to do the right thing. That then becomes a part of your strategy to move forward, to ensure that you're having a pulse on the community, to make sure that anything else that's going on out there is incorporated. So yeah, I don't think you ever really stop gathering data.
Yeah, I know there are two important things that you've done, mentioned is first taking that first step. As a leader, committing to it, even though you might not know everything and you feel like you don't have full confidence in your skills, but actually taking that action and the importance of continuing to gather data, that it's not a one and done thing, that you need to constantly check the pulse of the community and who it is that you're serving. And that's an important part of what it is that you do. I know that organizational capacity is important also. I know that LCD has been growing in size. You've added staff of late and you've added new initiatives. So, how do you assess organizational capacity accurately? Can you share a time when your assessment of true capacity led to a significant shift?
Yes. Okay. Let me give you a little bit of backstory. When I first came on board at LCD, this was 5 years ago, and I started learning the ins and outs of my new position. And within 4 months, the director at that time resigned. And also, another staff member resigned as well, which meant we were down to just two staff members,
Oh, wow.
myself and an assistant. And the assistant had just started working there. Now, the state government I had been warned that it actually takes a year to really begin to understand the processes within the state government. And here I was at 4 months in, and then COVID happened. And then we had two huge hurricanes, one after the other in the state, as well as an ice storm, weather that we had just never had before in Louisiana. So we lost electricity for the entire state shut down. So that was yeah, honestly, I can't even still articulate what a challenge that was at that time. And because all of this was happening, we meanwhile still had these other operations that we had to maintain. We had bills to pay. We had the community asking us for support and many other obligations to complete. And meanwhile, there were just the two of us in the office. So really trying to figure out how to strategically prioritize the work. And we literally could not do all that was needed, even though it was desperately needed and we wanted to, and it would make me cry because we weren't able to do all of these things that we wanted to do. We simply could not at that time, which meant we had to really look at what are the priorities around the community's well-being, about their ability to live and thrive, and how can we shift and adapt. Because, of course, COVID was a health emergency, which meant that had to rethink how we were providing service, meant we had to rethink how we were providing services and so many other things. We had to really start from scratch instead of keeping with the status quo. And I think that mindset is really an important one to retain, because we tend to establish ways and routines that things are done, and then we just stick with that status quo. And we don't necessarily evaluate the effectivity of those practices and procedures. I think it's so important for us to see how we internally can be not only building our capacity, but staying in touch with what's happening in the community externally, and have some things ready to address those external stressors, and not meaning to completely discard those other ideas or policies, but instead to work on all of these things simultaneously. So since then, we've been able to acknowledge that we're not necessarily going to be able to do everything that is needed all at once, but we are acknowledging it. We're aware that these things are needed. And we're also, meanwhile, working on a new job description to hire an additional staff member, which we were able to do, and continue to grow our numbers of staff, and that way growing our capacity. The organization is funded in a way that we're able to better get the needs met to ensure success. And I think we're often having to rethink that. And it's a very linear process. Oh, excuse me, interpreter correction. It's not a linear process. It is, in fact, a multi-layered process that moves forward in its own pace, in its own way.
Yeah, that touches on something else that I wanted to ask you about doing the work and actually meeting the community's needs, as well as, of course, needing to justify your existence and show quick wins while also building for the future. How do you juggle all of those things, especially while you're trying to grow your team?
Hmm. When you figure it all out, please do let me know. I think part of leadership, at least to me, as I said in the beginning, is sort of like just taking the risk, taking that first step and accepting vulnerability. And then pulling in people that are smarter than you are, surrounding yourself with them on your team. We all have what we call blind spots. We have things that we don't know or things that we're not yet able to see. And we have a very strong and talented team that is able to keep me informed about different things that I'm not aware of. So I think it's really important to have a variety of expertise and experience providing that input. Then when you function together as a team and think through things as a team, things become more clear in terms of what are the next steps. Certain things may be easier to achieve in the short term and others may take longer, but we can balance those rather than neglecting one or the other. The community so often doesn't see the work that happens behind the scenes or the things that are taking a longer term investment, despite the fact that we're actually working very hard to achieve those. So we do need to have the quick wins be highly visible while we're continuing to work on the longer term goals. And that's where having a really healthy board, a really strong participatory board is important, community members being engaged, and a team of staff who's also very engaged. And that way we all come together to figure out how to move forward and no one person feels overburdened. We can move together as a team.
Yeah, that's definitely important. Leadership is not a one person show. You need to collaborate with different folks and get different perceptions and different ideas to really build that momentum. I do want to ask you one more question, and then we're going to take some questions from the audience. Man, the time has gone by so fast. So, when you're working and building and shaping LCD, how do you manage expectations? People's everyday life gets impacted by things, right? So how do you tell people, sorry, your priority is going to have to wait for the greater good? How do you balance that while also maintaining trust and keeping the trust?
Wow. I previously mentioned mentioned the importance of variety or diversity, and I think that that's so important. We need to keep in mind that there's no one right solution to a challenge. we need to come up with a variety of ways to communicate with people, to stay transparent around our work, and to engage with the community. In our work, we try to scale things down to digestible pieces so that the community can process it. So often, state procedures are incredibly complex and elaborate and not intelligible. I barely understand it. So I certainly can't be explaining it to anyone else. So it's really important to capsulize it to make it intelligible. Another strategy that I've learned is engaging with the community on a casual level. Because if I only speak with the community in a formal manner, in a presentation style communication, we're not really going to create empathy. We're not really going to understand each other. So hosting something casual like a town hall or an open forum that's much more interactive, or just for me to just attend community events and just hear from people what's going on in their lives. I think it's very important for me to actually physically get out of the office sometimes and be amongst the community and eliciting those stories. That way people understand that I'm just a person and there are laws and policies that I have to follow. And at the same time, I want to know you and hear you and know how these things impact you. So I think it comes down to relationships.
Yeah, thank you for that. You've made some phenomenal points today, taking that first step, being bold, getting out there, being transparent, being present with others. I do want to ask you one question from the audience. And the question is, out of all of the events that have transpired at LCD, what has stood out to you the most or taught you the biggest lesson?
Oh, wow. Hmm. I feel like there's so many. I learn something new every day. Hmm. I think I really learned the importance of advocacy and how there is, in fact, strength in numbers, and how we really, I mean, if we're all working towards the same goal together to achieve that goal, we're much more powerful. The deaf community is precious and the work is long. There's a long list of things needed in our community. But it's really powerful when we come together and support each other with mutual respect. And yeah, I think just the power of advocacy has become very apparent to me on a daily basis, that we really can't be silent. We really can't be passive in response to things. We have to be active and do the work, even though it's tough. Yeah. Oh, and I would add one more item to that. As a hearing person, so for anyone wondering about a hearing person working in this environment, I think it's so important to have the community support that, as we all know that quote, nothing about us without us, that we as hearing people really have to take that seriously and respect our particular position in the community and the privilege that we hold, and be vulnerable and humble and really willing to be transparent and open and learn, and to know that that learning journey is never ending.
I think we could probably go on for another hour or two just on that topic alone. But
Next time.
unfortunately, we are almost at time. Thank you, Jana, for your leadership. Thank you for joining us today. And I also want to thank our sponsor, Interpreter Now, for providing ASL interpreter access and captioning. Our next Lead Differently will be announced soon for December, so keep an eye out for that. Again, Jana, thank you so much for your time and have a wonderful weekend.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for participating and joining.
Bye now.